There you go. Thank you, everyone. Great. And as soon as I finish my quick spiel, I'm going to mute myself with that red slash, and you'll see a red slash over Chuck Creeman's picture on there. Uh, to your right, as you go across the screen, there'll be a place called chat, and that's where we're going to do our questions. Too many folks here to do verbal questions. I will be monitoring the chat during the presentation. You're free at any time to click on the chat and enter your question where it says to. You can send the message to the whole group. Uh, just message to the event. I will monitor that. And once our presenter, Fasil, completes his presentation, I will review all the questions and sort of paraphrase them and summarize repetitive ones and pose those questions for a response by our distinguished presenter. Uh, so that's the way we're going to do it. We're going to stay muted during the presentation. We'll enter questions in the chat. What I anticipate, I know a lot of you want to say hi to each other. When we're all done, when we get the presentation completed, all our Q&As presented to Fasil and the response. At that point, maybe we could do an open mic and people can chat and reminisce and touch base with each other. But let's do that after we've completed the presentation and the Q&A. And with that, I'm going to mute my mic and turn it over to Rick Stoner to introduce our presenter. Go ahead, Rick.
Thanks, Jock, and thanks, Cindy. I'm delighted to be able to introduce our speaker today. I don't know if he had any contact with Peace Corps in his days. Maybe he was a bit young. He graduated from Addis Ababa University in 1985 and then got his master's from Helsinki University of Technology in 1990. And then for the last 3 decades, Fasil has devoted his time to the study and preservation of the architectural heritage of Ethiopia, from traditional housing to churches to historic towns. Recently, he's been the lead local architect on restoring the National Palace, Haile Selassie's Palace, Trinity Cathedral in Addis, and he's currently leading the restoration of the Gondar Palaces. My wife Elsa and I have been fortunate to work with him over the last 20 years in the historic town of Adwa, restoring Elsa's grandfather's compound next to the 300-year-old Medhani Alam Church, creating Assam Park to clean up and help demarcate the historic old town, and working to get the community to value and invest in preserving old Adwa. Over these years, we've learned that it isn't easy to do what Fasil is doing, but if anyone can do it, Fasil can. He has the right personality and an incredible skill set to tackle the challenges and create interest in and appreciation of the old. In addition to being an architect, he's an accomplished artist, a popular university professor at the Building College in Addis, a cultural and architectural historian, an urban planner, and a much sought after advisor and speaker. We're fortunate to have him with us via Zoom today. Thank you, Fasil, for your time, and over to you.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, everybody. I'm very glad to speak about my work, and thank you very much, Rick, for such a very generous presentation about myself. I'm now sitting in my office because I wanted to do it from home, but I could not rely with the internet that we have at home, so I came to the office to do that so that there will not be any interruption. Anyway, as Rick presented my work, I was born in Gondar in 1962, and I went to the American kindergarten. My dad used to work as a head of registrar, and there were a few American doctors there. So I had a few American kids as friends in my kindergarten days. And during weekends, my dad, who was an amateur historian, used to take these medical doctors to the Nektana monasteries and show them. And I had, this started some kind of fascination in me, and looking at these paintings of traditional religious paintings and also these monasteries. So, growing up in Gondar installed this interest in art and architecture. Chuck, may I start the slideshow? Share? Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, please go to share screen and start the show. Great, thank you.
I have to go to the first slide. Is it okay? Can you see the slides?
There you go. Now it's perfect.
Thank you. So as I was explaining earlier, I did my junior secondary school in Gondar, and that was the time when the Derg took power, and our family had to move. It was a very difficult time, so my family had to move to Addis to for us to be safe, and then also to continue my secondary school studies. I finished my high school in Toto. In those days, earlier it was called Teferi Mekonnen High School. Later, the name was changed to Toto High School. And just before I finished high school, I started to get very interested in architecture and of course in design. I had friends who were artists and so on. So I was always hanging around this kind of group of people. But the turning point was one day I was reading a book called, I think, Great People of the World. I'm not very sure exactly the name, but it sounded like that. Great People of the World. And I saw the work of Frank Lloyd Wright, the American architect, and I said, I have to be like him. I have to be like him. So that's how I decided to study architecture. And while I was a student at the university, I used to go to the National Museum. No, starting already at the 11th grade, I used to go to the National Museum and just listen to these older artists who were painters and so on. And once looking at what the drawings I made, the late artist Alamayo Buzuna, who was a sculptor, he was doing traditional art. And he asked me, why don't you try to draw, some of these things that I have to draw? So I started drawing, traditional church art, helping him. And actually, I started to learn how it was done. So finishing high school, joining the university at Addis Ababa University in the old, if some of you know what was called the building college, I was one of the 30 students who had to sit for an exam. We were 400 of us, so 30 of us were selected. And I spent 4 years doing my bachelor degree. And during my studies of architecture at the Addis Ababa University, towards the third year, I was starting to get a bit disappointed because there was no lectures or let's say an in-depth study on Ethiopian architecture. And once, because I grew up in Gondar, I knew we had some monuments, some architectural heritage. So I used to ask my teachers, why are we not having enough lectures? We had a series of lectures on Roman, European, and Eastern architecture, but not Ethiopian architecture. So I asked them, and the thing they told me was that we don't have enough documents, studies on Ethiopian architecture. So this was a big disappointment for me, but I never, stopped thinking about it. So after graduation, I was fortunate to be recruited as a graduate assistant, meaning teaching in the university as an assistant lecturer. And during my spare time, I used to go around Addis trying to draw, sketch these old houses of Addis. And I somehow got very much interested in the way these buildings were built. In those days, that was in the late 80s, these buildings were not, this was the Derg time, so nobody cared about this architecture. It was something like of not so much interest. So by drawing these buildings, I started to learn the way they were built, the material that was used, and so on. And in 1987, there was a conference, a symposium on the centenary of Addis Ababa. So I presented a paper, and the public was saying, oh, really, this is some interesting architecture. So ever since then, I have been very interested, and I still keep on studying these buildings. Unfortunately, we lost some of them in the last decades and so on. So after I finished, I started working in the university. I got a scholarship to go to Finland, and I stayed 2 years in Finland. And then after coming from Finland, I started working part-time in architectural offices, but I never forgot my interest in history of architecture. And also, of course, in my spare time, I was also doing some painting. But at times, I was trying to attend lectures. I had friends who were historians, anthropologists, and so on. In Ethiopia, as architects and sometimes also engineers, we are considered to be technical people, the people who are not very much interested in the humanities. But due to my entourage, the people who were around me or the people I hung around, I started to get more and more interested about history. And so one of the first projects after coming, from Finland, after studying in Finland, I learned a kind of sensitivity to community architecture, architecture design that puts the community as an important part of the design thinking. So one of the first projects I did was the Red Terror Museum, which is in Addis Ababa. The thing is, between the design and the realization, it took many years. The initial idea of the committee, of the Red Terror Committee, this was after the Derg. So the Derg fell in 1991. So in 1992, 93, people started to form social committees and thinking about, putting some kind of memory to the people who were killed by the Derg. So this building that I'm showing you, which stands at the corner of Mescal Square today, I had to act both as an architect and then as a client, because the idea of the client or the group of people was to install a very tall 40-meter monument like the way they do in these socialist countries. But I said, what good will that be? So we need to teach the young people. As a young, instructor at the university, I could see that young people were already forgetting that part of our history. So I insisted on making a museum that tells the story of what happened. So, and then to make a low-rise building that fits to the topography and so on. And there was a lot of critique. It was years, weeks and months and years of debate. Finally, it was built after 6 or 7 years of waiting. Well, the other thing that happened was that my study of architecture, the history of architecture of Addis Ababa, was published in 2007. This was all the sketches, photographs my friend Denis Gerard, who was working with me, took, and historical documents. We published it in a book in 2007. So this was one of the results of my studies and so on. In this book, you find a kind of genesis of how the architecture, the traditional architecture of Ethiopia has somehow been brought together with what was coming from abroad, what Armenians, Greeks, Indians bring as their tradition of architecture was melded together, and then we find a kind of hybrid architecture. So these things were discussed in the book. This book is again republished a couple of years ago now with a hardcover. So that was the result of the study of history and architecture. And in 2005, there was a World Bank project which which was called the Ethiopian Cultural Heritage Project. And my background as an architect, as a young architect and enthusiast of history and conservation, somehow fitted to the profile that they were looking for. So I was employed for an Italian consultant to work in Aksum. One thing I discovered while working in Aksum, you know, there are so many big monuments in Aksum, but the vernacular architecture, which was extremely fascinating, was again not so much respected or part of the heritage, the historical heritage of the place. So I started studying these buildings, and then finally I convinced the authorities that this has to be included as part of the let's say the late Aksumite or medieval tradition of architecture. Unfortunately, due to neglect, some of these houses are not well kept and so on. It is after this work in Aksum that I met Rick and Elsa, and we started working in Adwa on their project. The other building that I did in Aksum is the Aksumite Heritage Foundation, which was established by Dr. Sahaye Taferra, who's head of ECDC in Virginia. And he asked me if I could design a library. So I tried to use the Aksumite architectural language, I mean, historic architectural language, melded it with a modern facility, and then used traditional craftsmen to build the walls out of stone masonry. As you know, that part of Ethiopia is very rich in different kinds of stone. So we use the stone, and we restored also the palace. And now the library is one of the best libraries in Aksum. Even the university students come to read there. Then a few years later, I had the chance to build a school in Mekelle. This was a school built by an English NGO called Rainbows for Children and TDVA, which is the Tigray Disabled Veterans Association. And to do this building, I had to do a lot of convincing. The European clients, it was very easy to convince them. What was difficult was to convince my compatriots, my Ethiopian clients, because they felt that I'm taking them back to their traditional, not so well respected kind of architecture. We built these buildings out of stone and earth mortar, which no modern building is built today. So I tried to show them that you can combine modern technology with traditional material. If you look at the toilet, which is at the bottom right, that's an ecological toilet where I had to consult or discuss with a very high level British consulting firm. I tried to adopt an ecological toilet which does not use water, and you know water is very scarce. So we built a toilet and it's very clean, it does not smell. On your left, you see the music room. The roof of the music room collects water. So there is an underground water system which collects more than 40 to 50,000 liters of water. The kids use this water to wash their hands almost 6 months a year. So it is kind of ecological. You know, I believe that historic preservation or using traditional materials is an important part of sustainable development. This is the Adwa Heritage Center, which Rick and Elsa, we did together with Rick and Elsa. And we continued the tradition of building with stone, local stone. And also the community has also benefited because they also built a bridge. And the project's aim is to create this Assam River Park, which is a project that involves protecting the historic neighborhood and then creating a well-landscaped area which the community can use for entertainment, also preserving the environment. Next is my project I did for the Goethe Institute in Addis Ababa. This was the house of the Crown Prince Asfausen, and the Germans asked me to look for a historic building. So I suggested this building, and then we transformed it into the Goethe Institute. The terrace you see on the bottom left used to be the terrace. We turned it into a library. I created a courtyard where new classrooms actually surround this open space. So it is a well-built thing. So after coming, when I went to Aksum, what happened was just before I went to Aksum to work for this in 2005-6, I had a chance to go for my PhD abroad. I got a scholarship. I had to make a very difficult choice. Either I had to decide to go abroad, leaving whatever is here to be done, or to go to Aksum and do and work on a cultural heritage project, which I was always dreaming of doing. So I decided not to go for my PhD and go to Aksum to work for that. And I have never regretted that decision because I feel that I have learned more than a PhD, working with the community, trying to discuss with different professionals, working with archaeologists, historians, and so on. So it's even though I did not get a degree, I have learned a lot from there. So upon return from my 2.5 years in Aksum, I got a unpaid leave from the university. So when I came back, we tried to form a department of what we call historic preservation. So I had a new program where in a couple of years we started to teach architecture students with master's degree in historic preservation. In the picture, you see our students working, going on a field study with students from Columbia University in New York. So we started to create this collaboration with different universities, and this was one of the studies, and we produced a document, Heritage Tourism and Urbanization in Lalibela. The students enjoyed it very much, and it was also a cultural encounter between American, US students and my students here. My students do not only work in Lalibela, they also work in Addis. We try to identify historic buildings, historic neighborhoods, and try to find ways in how to protect these historic neighborhoods. And this kind of brings some kind of attention, public awareness for these areas. After returning back to Addis, I got again the chance to restore the St. Mary of Zion Church in Aksum. This was a consultancy job. So my team and myself, we studied it very well. And then we had to follow the renovation of the historic Aksum Mariam Church. Another building that we did in Addis is the Blatengeta Herui residence, which is now the Ethiopian Science Academy. The Ethiopian Science Academy, were gracious enough to really believe in restoring these buildings. So we restored these, it's the headquarters of that. Recently, a couple of years ago, I had also the chance to go and work on the Jimma Bajifar Palace with Varnero, an Italian contractor. The work is undergoing and it's expected to end to be completed in the next 2 months. I also did the design of I just showed you the plan. It is based on the Aksumite Palace plan. It is the library of the Institute of Ethiopian Studies. It took a long time to complete, and I'm not very happy on the construction. We tried because they asked for donation, but it was always very difficult. So anyways, the building is built. Recently, that is like 2 years ago, yes, I met a famous playwright, Ethiopian playwright, a lady who is now based. She has been in the US for the last 27 years. This is Alam Sahai Odajo. She has a cultural center called the Taitu Cultural Center, and she came to Ethiopia. And I knew one of my childhood friend, Dr. Gabeya, who lives in Maryland in the US. He told her to contact me. So she wanted to establish a new cultural center. So I used this opportunity to convince her instead of building a new building, why don't you try to restore a historic building in Addis Ababa, which were some of them were really in a very dangerous state. So she was convinced. She asked the city government, this is like 5 years ago. And then 4 years ago, they gave her the deterred Haile Giorghis house, which used to be the second municipality building of Addis Ababa, and then a high court. And we restored, we worked, it was in a very dilapidated condition. We restored it, and this is a picture of Alam Sahai and myself taken a couple of months ago. And the house is fully restored now. She wants to open a museum and some kind of have a different kind of cultural activities. The other church we restored, me and my team, is the Bat Al Mariam Minilik Mausoleum. It was completed 2 years ago. We worked on it for a year. And then, of course, the big work that Rick mentioned is the restoration of the National Palace, which was called the Jubilee Palace of Emperor Haile Selassie. The French government funded it, and they had a French, very famous French architect who had to come and make a proposal. And then I, as a local architect and consultant, I was given the job of elaborating the design and then also completing or following the work of restoration every day. This is a very huge responsibility. I have to say I was very fortunate, and all the things that I have done in the past have led to this kind of work. So it was also a learning process. Some of the graduates from our master's program were also working together with me. So everything, even the shutters have to be brought down, scrubbed by hand, repainted again. A new technical installation has to be done in the basement floor. From a main kitchen, it has turned to a museum. So I hope that those of you who might come to Ethiopia in the next 3 months will be able to visit it at the museum. It's now fully restored, the building, and this is the lighting in the evening. And it's not only that, the French had an expert team from Versailles Palace. Their advisors were people from Palace of Versailles. And they said for such a large palace museum, you need to have a very big reception hall. So we built a new reception hall, very modern, very well illuminated, and then a vehicular museum, a car museum. If you see at the bottom, a train, the Haile Selassie train and Haile Selassie's cars are already being exhibited. You are having a first view because the public have not seen it yet. It will open maybe in the next month. I, of course, did not only work on historic preservation. I have to work also on social different projects, which one of them is the Haile Mannas Academy. The founder is Wezero Ribka Haile, the daughter of Getachew Haile, Professor Getachew Haile. She raised funds from the US, and her dream was to make really a school for outstanding students. So this school, educates students who have the highest grades from all over Ethiopia. They come and study here. So I combined some traditional, concepts of traditional architecture into here, to this. If you look down on the right, you see the gate. This is one dormitory building of students. The gate actually represents the traditional gate of houses in Northern Showa and many parts of Ethiopia. I also designed houses for some people. This is the house, the interior of a house that I designed for artist Henok Tabasden, who's a guitarist. The building was built, after I designed it, the building was built by traditional craftsmen. We use bamboo like we do in the churches, and we use earth, mud, to build the wall. I also restore houses for residents. This is a house of Mr. Nabil Kello, who has now become a very strong supporter of historic preservation. We did 2 blocks, a modern block for bedroom, but the main living area is a historic house. This is the work of the restoration of the Trinity Cathedral, which is undergoing. We'll be completing it again. We have been told that the tablet has to come back in 1 month. So it's underway. The final and biggest work that I am now working on is the restoration of the Fasil Giorghis World Heritage Site, which has 7 prominent buildings. And me, of course, it's not only me. I have a team of younger architects, most of them my students. We have a public presentation room, so visitors can come in this hall and see the work that we are doing. So, and then we are doing also the landscape, which is going very, very fast. So this is really, everything that I have been doing so far has been, a process of learning and growing up in the profession. So I have now been lucky enough. I wouldn't dream of doing this 10 years ago, but it's like a ladder. Everything that I have been doing has been a learning process. I learn from historians, I learn from books, I learn also from people. So the tradition of architecture, which was disappointing me at the beginning in my school days, is now probably coming. We are getting close, and we are learning from our tradition. We are learning from our architecture. We have, courses now, full courses in history of architecture in our school, and other universities are trying to imitate our courses. So I am doing all this. You can imagine it keeps me very busy, but I'm fortunate. I have a wife who understands and who is very supportive. I have 2 kids. Unfortunately, none of them became architects, to my disappointment. But I will try in the future to bring them to this profession. Anyway, this is what I have been doing so far, and thank you very much for your attention. This is, of course, one thing I forgot to mention. I am not only working in Ethiopia, I am now expanding the Uganda National Museum. Thank you. Thank you very much. I have finished my slides. I hope I have not been too long. I will be happy to answer questions and comments. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me start off the questions with my own first question. What are the technical challenges in restoring in Gondar? Is it the masonry? Is it the duplicating the and stabilizing the stone? What are you trying to accomplish with the restoration? What will we see if we come 2-3 years from now to Gondar? What will the evidence that we see from your work?
Yes, yeah, very good. Thank you for your question. It's a very good question. We spent more than 6 months studying the existing situation. A lot of, some of the walls have cracks. There are levels completely collapsed. There are platforms, floors that have completely collapsed. There are also walls that are gradually deteriorating. So we have both, we are working on strengthening the masonry work, fixing the cracks, but above all, we are introducing new floors and so on. And what is going to be surprising, I hope so, I hope we finish it the way we have planned. What you will be seeing as different is that the spaces are going to be used. For instance, the Fasilides Castle, the biggest one, will have a museum on 2 floors, which will tell the history of the palace and also the history of the region. Still maintaining the buildings, we are going to have, exhibition in the spaces. So you'll not be seeing empty rooms. You'll be seeing the history. Some of there will be showcase with items from the Bulgarian or later periods. The Dawit Palace, for instance, will be using it for, we call it adaptive reuse in historic preservation. We will use it for, even for conferences, having very light roofs. The material, the authenticity of the buildings will be maintained. but at the same time, they will be used for cultural purposes. The Bagafa Palace will have, let's say, high-level traditional Ethiopian food served. And opposite to that, the stables for the horses, that will be used for handicraft display. So what will be new is the buildings serving a kind of purpose and starting to be alive. So people will not only visit empty rooms and so on and admire the architecture, of course, but they will be also, you know, participating in different cultural activities, seeing exhibitions and so on. There will be also lighting, so in the evening it will not be dark. When you take a picture of the city of Gondar at night, it's totally dark. So there will be castle lighting, castles that like you see in Europe and other countries, there will be lighting, which will be done carefully, so you can't even visit it at night. So this will be the new things that will happen in Gondar, in the Gondar Palace compound.
Yes, I recall when I was there in 2013 that we were amazed at the structures, but the rooms were not, the rooms were empty rooms that we were viewing. So a couple of additional questions in terms of the National Palace. How much and what parts of the palace will be open to the public for viewing as part of the restored facility, the restored structure? Is
Well,
one question.
the National Palace, I'll go back to that picture. Yes, there will be some rooms open, but recently the government, you see the floor, the right-hand picture, you see the floor, it's a double parquet. The marquetry, which is very intricate work, is now being discussed. If we allow the public to walk on this floor, it will be damaged. So the idea is that in the basement floor, all the treasures of Emperor Haile Selassie will be displayed in showcases, of course, and it will take a full day or more to visit all the artifacts, the gifts, all the letters and everything. And you can go around the compound, see a number of rooms, and then the other attraction will be the car museum, where we will show where sorry, sorry.
Very
Yes,
good.
we're seeing these cars, the car models from the 1920s up to the 1970s, the Bentleys, the Mercedes, all the Dukes, all the cars, the best cars. American presidents also used to give gifts to Emperor Haile Selassie. They knew that he liked cars, so he had gifts, from 3 or 4 presidents. So you'll be seeing all these cars, and of course the train, the imperial wagon, where he was traveling from Addis to Diradawa and Djibouti. All that is going to be displayed.
All right. Well, speaking of going, I have a couple more questions. Is there any work being done in Harar, particularly in the old town? And then a second question, which I'll just put in the queue for you. What are the technical challenges, the technical skills that you are trying to impart to your students? What are the preservation concepts and skills that are part of your curriculum as you bring the new students into the field of historic preservation?
Yes. First, Harar. Yes, Harar, there is some work being done. I was only involved some years ago, about 10 years ago, in making some studies and selecting projects and so on. But I'm not directly involved now. But some of my previous students are involved in Harar. The Harar architecture is mainly vernacular architecture, traditional architecture, and of course there are the mosques and so on. The good thing about Harar is the community are very conscious and very respectful of their architectural tradition, which is not the case in many parts of Ethiopia. So the Hararis themselves, they try to maintain themselves. Recently, I have seen a trend which is a little bit worrying, which is that they are painting the walls with different colors, and they are making them look a little bit like, sometimes Mexican or Mediterranean houses with pink and this and that. And we are trying to stop that. But paint can be, of course, repainted. It's the worst thing is demolishing. If the historic building is demolished, it's the end. So that's what we have to be careful about. Concerning training skills, myself in my office, we have been working with different contractors, and that means that we have to, it takes time, it takes patience to train them, to make them aware. And we try to combine, for instance, traditional craftsmen with contractors, because the traditional craftsmen are people who are gradually being forgotten, or that their field is being looked over. For instance, with Rick and Elsa, we discovered a priest, for instance, who was a mason, a very good mason. With this, he is a traditional craftsman who has learned the skill from his ancestors. So we try to encourage these people and use them like we used these lessons in the library building, the Aksumite Heritage Foundation library building. And sometimes, a person who's, what's the name in English? Person who is a clay, an earth plasterer, person who works with earth. We found in North Shoa, he's now working in Jimma. I brought him, I got the connection, so I brought him to work in Jimma. So he's working with all the clay plastering. He knows the techniques, traditional techniques, and we use this traditional techniques for restoration works. So it's a learning. I'm learning every day. I learn from traditional craftsmen. I try to teach them how to deal with structural problems, and then we deal. It's a collective effort. So we teach each other, we learn from each other, and then we create a team. I'm not saying that there are many craftsmen like this in Ethiopia. There are very few, but we need to encourage them. We need to give them work so that they continue to do what they do, because they are very important also in restoring our historic buildings and so on.
Yeah. So another question has come in terms of community buy-in. You talked about work. Of course, you work with each of the communities in the neighborhood of the places you're working. How are you bringing awareness to the community of the importance of adherence to historic, principles as you do the work? Where there may be some proclivity of, well, let's tear it down and start from new. How are you gaining among the people a greater understanding of historic preservation and its importance?
Yes, you see, yeah, I think it's a good question. When we start to work with communities, you know, there is a tendency in Ethiopia, developing country, historic buildings, old buildings, especially vernacular architecture or traditional buildings, are considered to be very backward. Some people, especially when they get money, they prefer to build new buildings, concrete buildings, and so on. So first of all, we try to tell them that there is value in their buildings. And when these buildings are restored, they can see, and we show them also when the buildings are restored, that they can be good buildings as any other building. The only thing that we need to do is to create or to find ways to have modern installation, that they have electricity, some kind of running water, and so on. These are things that need technical know-how. So we try to teach the community that if they preserve their houses, they will be, of course, an asset, and they will be an attraction for tourism. That's one economic benefit. On the other hand, we also try to find potential, it sometimes is not the same people. Sometimes you have people, wealthier people who are interested to do or to get these houses and use them as restaurants and so on. In Addis, for instance, I have a long waiting list of people who would like to own or get some kind of, on a lease basis, some kind of these historic traditional houses to restore them and use them as art gallery and so on. So there is a growing awareness. The only the biggest problem that we see is the speed of development in some cities of Ethiopia is, I think, a threat for our preservation work. And we have, in fact, the most difficult thing is to convince city officials to make them understand that there is value. Instead of pulling down a historic building and building a tall concrete structure, we try to tell them that if we preserve this, there is a lot of we maintain the skills, the traditional skills, and so on, artisanal skills. There is a tourist attraction. There is also knowledge, knowledge. I myself have learned a lot by studying this historic architecture. And I take my students to study these buildings. And when they look at these buildings and measure them and look at the materials, they learn about how our ancestors used to build. So this is also part of research and so on. So it's, I will not say it is easy, but it's a long process and you need patience and you need work.
So it's an adaptive reuse concept.
Yes, we do that too. We do that too. Yes.
Yeah. I know that Gondar and many other places in Ethiopia are designated by UNESCO as historic heritage places. Two parts of a question to that. Is that a help or a hindrance to be designated by UNESCO as a historic site? And are there other places that are not currently designated that might be added to the UNESCO inventory of designated heritage sites?
Yeah, when you preserve your heritage, you in the long run, it will be recognized globally as a World Heritage Site. For instance, if you take the case of Harar, if the Harari community did not maintain their traditional architecture and kept it to this age, it would not have been recognized as a World Heritage Site. So the first responsibility, of course, lies with the community. At the same time, we need to be, of course, aware that there are also a lot of restrictions, a lot of guidelines that people might not like. For instance, if you want to do like a tin roof, a metal roof, it will not be allowed because it will spoil the architecture, it spoil its look. It is registered for a number of reasons. So you need to be able to convince them. But not only that, you need to find also technical solutions. I mean, you will not, people will not continue to live in a house where the roof is leaking. So we need to have technical solutions to help them. In some churches in Gondar, for instance, the priests want to change the material. So you consistently try to find technical solutions. So it's not only that you stick with what is there. You have to find ways on how to balance the restrictions or guidelines of UNESCO and give a new life to the building, to the historic, to the monument. So it's that's how we as modern architects, engineers also bring in the knowledge that we have learned from our technical schools and put it together with traditional skills. So we work together in these things, but the UNESCO guidelines sometimes are very tough. They're very, very tough. So You need to find ways on how to convince them. Lalibela now we are talking about shelter, canopy, a new one. And the French government is going to finance it. But the discussion has taken more than a year, going back and forth. UNESCO says, no, this is not allowed. And then technical solutions have to be found and so on. So I will not say it's easy, but it's a continuous negotiation. You need knowledge to do it, but you need to also be able to negotiate and convince.
Yeah. So the existing canopy is going to be replaced or modified
Yes.
in some manner.
In due course, yes. It will not be removed immediately, but when the new canopy, it's a different kind of canopy, it's going to come and then it will be replaced.
Okay. Yes. So the other question we have, how as we as people continuing our connection to Ethiopia, how can we encourage historic preservation?
Yes, thank you for saying that. I think there are areas where we need to collaborate and we need your assistance. I think first of all, it's the knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer meaning American technical skills. I mean, people in the US. I have met a few, conservation architects in the US, and they need they also ask sometimes how they can help us. So transfer of knowledge is one. The other point is there is I did not show very much, but we have very few art conservators, painting conservators. As you know, Ethiopia has a lot of monasteries and a lot of traditional historic paintings. You have seen some of it in the book of Neil and
Yes.
Silverman.
Yes.
There are a lot of the work, but painters are there. But restoring this work is an art and science by itself. So if you can assist, for instance, for art restorers to come to Ethiopia and train people. I can help in organizing some, on-site work. I'm now working on St. Gabriel Church, which has paintings, old paintings, maybe 120 years old, but there are paintings in many, many monasteries, and we need, and the people I know, maybe there are 2 or 3 art restorers in the whole of Ethiopia. Can you imagine? So we need to train these art restorers. So if you can support the travel and also, let's say, accommodation of these experts or find these art restorers to come and train our people, our art restorers here, budding young art restorers. It will help us a lot. In the craft also area, there are areas that need, so I think there is room for training and knowledge transfer. The picture I showed you about Colombia, the university students of Columbia University students, our students were financed by the US Embassy here to go for the field school. And the World Monuments Fund, which is based in New York, helped also the American side. So we collaborate in field work. So there is, a continuous knowledge transfer. I think when COVID came, it interrupted everything. So we hope that we'll resume our collaboration, both in historic preservation of buildings and also paintings and sculpture and so on. So this is some area that we can work. And of course, if you can help us also in publishing some of the works that has been done, it will also be very, very useful.
Well, I know, Fasil, I happen to know a historic preservation architect of some experience, and I don't know if he's interested, but I can send his contact information through Rick, and he's done historic work all his entire career. The firm he works with specializes in historic preservation in the U.S. He worked for the National Park Service and helped write the guidelines for historic preservation in the U.S.
So that would be very good. That would be very helpful.
yeah. And Neil, I don't know, and any other people who have connections to people with skills in restoration. So it's not canvas painting, but it's painting on masonry on stone. Is that the kind of art? I mean, Neil will probably understand this better in terms of the church art that he is an expert in.
Yes, it's both actually. Most of the paintings are on canvas, on handmade kind of textile, which is made of cotton. And most of these church paintings are painted on that, but there are also paintings on rock. In Tigray, in Lalibela, and so on, there are paintings directly painted on the rock. And this needs a very special kind of skill, sometimes even equipment to study, the level of deterioration and so on. It's so that's one thing that we can really we look forward to get some kind of collaboration and assistance and so on.
So another question. I know we're going to the hour. I don't know what people's time constraints are. I'm certainly fascinated, willing to go a longer time. Question: If I don't know what you know about the current state of tourism in Ethiopia, but if at some point we are looking to make a visit to Ethiopia, the question is, what is your availability for providing some guidance to a group of us who might be touring to focus on the historic sites of Addis or other, Gondar or other places, the traditional historic tour that many of us have already done, but might be interested in revisiting. What was your availability, and could you provide some guidance as we would plan a visit?
Yeah, I would love that. In fact, the book that I showed you earlier, the book I published, it's the result of, I used to take also people around Addis to show them the historic buildings. And a lot of diplomats, they asked me, so we group people together. So I spend sometimes my weekends taking people for a tour, a walking tour and so on. Sometimes we travel by car and then go to a place and look at the buildings, because if you don't know where they are, you will not find them. So I do that, and I will be glad to do that. It's only that I need to be informed a little bit ahead of time so that I can schedule myself. But I really would like, of course, to show people around, either in Addis, or if the peace situation improves, also in other parts of Ethiopia. Yeah, I do that. I have done that in the past, and I would, I love doing that.
Yeah, you mentioned crafts, and the other questions come about that we know that much of the historic cultural tradition is in textiles and basket weaving. Do you have any connection with that? And is that skill being transmitted and preserved as far as you know?
Well, you see, there is I mean, people, especially in the rural areas, and also in Addis and many cities, they still use as household items this hand woven baskets, so on. But the level of artistry, the craftsmanship is not as good as it is in some of these, because the well done, the very well done baskets and so on were used also for tourist markets and so on. And when tourism declines, as it has done in the last 4, 5 years in Ethiopia, these people are not finding enough market. So they gradually go, start to do things, other things and so on. But I think we need that's also one of my interests. And during the Ethiopia Cultural Heritage Project, there was the idea of marketing this abroad and finding a market link for these people so that they will maintain the heritage, and there will be also places to sell. My wife herself, she had a crafts shop where she collects these things and also sells them and asks them to do this. She does not have the shop anymore, but she wants to reopen again. There are a few people, mainly women, who are doing this kind of work, but tourism, the recovery of tourism is an important element for this kind of market. So we hope that peace comes back to Ethiopia, and then we can travel everywhere, and we will help these people to 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 maintain their age-old tradition of craftsmanship.
So you're able to get to Gondar by air service. It's the way
Yes, I
you
was last weekend. I was in Gondar, and the surrounding is a little bit tricky, but to go to Gondar, you can fly and you can visit the sites in Gondar and so on. I go there very often, maybe sometimes even twice a month. Uh, but I have colleagues, the younger colleagues, where my ex-students are working with me. Some of them are permanently following the site, so it's. I go to border. As I see it now, Tigray seems to be easier to travel around by car and so on. I was there also 2 weeks ago, no, 3 weeks ago. We were in Aksum and Adwa and Yeha. We did a bit of traveling around, and it seems to be okay.
yeah. So you were at Yaha. Is there preservation work going around in Yaha? Is that what you mentioned?
Yes, yes, the team of Dr. Iris Garlach, who is a German archaeologist, they were. I saw when I was there. I saw 24 Germans and 80 Ethiopian, workers working together. More than 100 people working on a huge palace that they have uncovered and that they are working on, and they are completing the museum. There is going to be a Yeha archaeological museum, and there are also sites a little bit outside the Yeha village proper. So it is, she told me, this is a secret, she told me that they might work towards, getting it registered as a World Heritage Site.
Okay.
It is the oldest, in fact, it is the oldest built structure in sub-Saharan Africa.
It's pre-Christian. Yes, very.
It is pre-Christian.
Yes, I was there in 2013. So
Okay, okay. So
that's
it
right. I
has,
happen to know.
you were there in 2013. Oh, when
Yes.
you go there, you will be happy. There's much, it's changed. There's a lot
Okay.
uncovered, and the museum is going to be amazing. It's a very good
Okay.
museum. And there is another museum which is worth also visiting, the Wukro Museum, which is exhibiting findings from 3 archaeological sites in that region. So there is some development. And the reason why I went to Aksum is the Italian government wants to help the Aksum Archaeological Museum to redo the whole exhibit, and even possibly restore a couple of houses, the houses that I showed you. They are trying to fund some of it. So it will be like a pilot project where people would eventually learn from that and try to restore this house. And this historic, the old area of Aksum will be one more attraction. For, I mean, you go there, you will not see only the stelae, but you will see traditional houses and visit some of them and buy crafts, handicraft work and so on. That's the idea.
All right. Any other questions? I don't see anything else in the chat room.
Shall I chat?
So, Cindy, you want to turn it back to you and wrap up? I don't know if people want to unmute and say hello to their colleagues and friends, long lost friends. Maybe not so long and lost, but I'll turn
Sure,
it back to you to wrap up, Cindy.
that's fine. And thank you so much, Fasil. I also wanted to know, you said that there's a new edition of your book. Do you know where it can be purchased in the United States?
Uh, I have to ask the publisher. I will tell, probably I'll share that I will tell this to Rick. I'm sure it's on Amazon. When you in Addis, it's sold in the Book World outlet, which is in the Sheraton, Hilton, and two other places, four places in Addis. Yeah. Oh, one, sorry. So I will check and I will let you know through Rick Stoner.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Fasil, and thank you for all of the information and your willingness, if and when we are ever able to come back to Ethiopia to meet with us. That would be fabulous.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And for anyone else who wants to talk to a friend that they see on here, please feel free to do so. And I did want to mention July 18th through the 21st, the National Peace Corps Association is hosting a conference for all returned Peace Corps volunteers. So if any of you are interested, we EERPCV would also like to know if there's enough interest to have some kind of little reunion for everyone here. It will be in Washington in July. So if you could just send us a note, that would be great. And whatever else you would, if you'd like to chat with each other now, go right ahead. And thank you so much for coming on a Sunday morning. Fasil, thank you.
Thank you. So I can leave, yeah?
Okay. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Fasil.
Yes.
Get home safely.
Yeah, and one last question that was raised about the embassies. Yes, the American embassy, of course, through historic preservation, and then the Italians, and also a little bit the British and so on. But each embassy, but the main one, I have to thank you as Americans that the Ambassadors Fund for Historic Preservation is a good supporter of preservation work in Ethiopia, and really I hope that it continues to be so. So thank you very much and good night. I think I have to go home, and so good night. Oh, good day. Good day. Yes.
Good day. Yes.
Have a
Good
good
night.
day.
Good night.
Bye,
Yeah,
bye.
it's past 7 p.m. in Ethiopia.
Yes, thank you.
I'm Saad.